This is the first recording of my learner who is in grade 4.
Another boy. John is another boy. He prefers to follow his parents. Comedy is fond of wasting water and the tree. He after cup and pull out the plant and tomorrow grade where he goes. After Lynn and John month always made him to be a good boy. He still could not doing bad this. One day John found himself in a very dirty and small plant. He felt irritated and glad not take the dirty around him. He continued walking until he come to a very hot plant. He looked for a tree to reach, but there was not tree in. He sees nothing. He found but sand. Because of the desire, he his student feel drained and he looked for water, but the cloud find no water. He freeze because of explain this and heart that he feel unsure for help, but no one seemed to hear him. Get me out of here! I don't want to be here. I'm your student. John White crying all of student. He had a family for whom John called it Allen and with having him John is walking by his mother called Irving's was just a dream. He hugged his mother and said, "We will follow that his mother always telling him." After what bad happened, John realized the importance of the training around him. He promised not to do the bad business that he is used to do. Another boy.
The learner said "notter" instead of "naughty."
That is another boy.
The learner said "notter" again instead of "naughty."
He prefers to follow his parents.
Refuses was mispronounced as frohis, and command was mispronounced as commonly.
Is fond of wasting water and the tree.
The learner mispronounced he as his, fond as fond, wasting as wasting, and electricity as energy.
He after cup and pull out the plant.
The learner mispronounced often as after, and plants as plant.
And tomorrow grade where he goes.
The learner mispronounced throw as tomorrow, garbage as grave, and wherever as where.
After Lynn and John month always.
Learner mispronounced although as after, Edna as end, John's as John, and mother as man.
Mary made him to be a good boy.
The learner said wearing instead of reminded and inserted he between reminded and him.
Boy, he still could not doing bad this.
The learner mispronounced could as called, avoid as avi, and inserted could between avoid and doing.
One day John found himself in a very dirty and filthy plant.
The learner said smell instead of smelly and plant instead of place.
He felt irritated and glad not take the dirty around him.
The learner mispronounced felt as feel, irritated as irrited, could as cloud, and dirt as dirty.
And he continued walking until he come to a very hot place.
The learner inserted me between he and continued, and mispronounced continued as contour, inserted the between continued and walking, mispronounced came as come, and place as plant.
And he looked for a tree to reach, but there was not tree in his seat.
The learner said reach instead of rest, not instead of no, and cease instead of sight.
There's nothing he found but sand because of the desire he was walking.
The learner said disan instead of distance, and the learner initially said walk, then walken, both of which are attempts to pronounce walked.
When his student feel trained and his
The learner said student instead of suddenly, mispronounced felt as feel, tired as trained, and thirsty as his.
he looked for water, but the cloud find no water.
The learner said the instead of he, cloud instead of could, and inserted he after water.
Chris and Chris because of explain.
The learner mispronounced he as her and said his on both cried, omitted the, and mispronounced extreme as explain.
This and heart the he feel.
The learner mispronounced thirst as this, heat as heart, inserted the between heat and he, and mispronounced felt as feel.
Feel in shore for help, but no one seemed to hear him.
The learner mispronounced he as hin, shouted as shore, and seemed as seemed.
Get me out of here! I don't want to be here. I'm your.
The learner omitted I, and the learner initially said an, then your.
Your student John White crying.
The learner said student instead of shouted.
All of student. He had a family volume John.
The learner omitted a, and she said student instead of sudden, family instead of familiar, and volume instead of voice.
Called it Aline and with having him.
The learner inserted he between Edna and while, and mispronounced while as with and tapping as having.
John is walking by his mother called Irving was just a dream.
The learner said walking instead of awakened, are readings instead of realizing, and omitted the word it.
He hugged his mother and said, "We will follow that his mother always telling him."
The learner said that instead of what, and the learner initially mispronounced mother as ma, but eventually pronounced it correctly in the second attempt.
After what bad happened,
The learner said bad instead of had.
When John reasoned the importance of the training around him.
The learner mispronounced realized as reason, importance as important, and things as thing.
He promised not to do the bad business that he is used to do.
The learner said promise instead of promises. She omitted do and said bees instead of habits and use instead of used.